Okay, so moving on from that, hopefully you're all sort of aware where you can access the help if you need it now. Let's have a look at some of the basic functionality within the system, and let's start by creating a prospect. Okay, and this is the same for whether you're creating a client or whether you're creating a prospect. The only difference is if you create a prospect, you can create an opportunity with a prospect, but if that job then is promoted to a live job, you will need to promote the prospect to a client. Okay, so this should be your toolbar that you will have access to. There may be certain restrictions within there, but the areas that we're looking at today, probably not. So let's start by looking at the Clients tab here. So if I click onto that, and let's maximize that so you can all see it nice and clearly. Okay, this will be a list of all of your clients and all of your prospects. A client being somebody that you have either in the past or are currently working with, doing jobs for. A prospect being somebody that you would like to do some work with or for. Okay, when you want to create a new one, all you do is select new, and whether it's a client or the prospect, you will see the same thing. So just for demoing purposes, I'm going to select a new client. So when we select new client, we will have what's called a new client card appearing. All you need to do is write a code in there to begin with. So I'm going to use the agency works just as an example. So I'm just going to put Tor as my code, and then the name, obviously, the agency works. Okay, you can see there that you've got details to fill in, such as the address, the phone number. If you want to copy it off their website or off an email, that's fine. If you copy and select paste address from clipboard, it should put it in there. Now, for any reason, if it doesn't put it into the right tab, let's say if the postcode actually goes into this area, let me just put our postcode in. Okay, you can just drag and drop that into the right area. It saves a bit of time. Okay, the next thing is putting a phone number in, and then dependent on how each of you have got these structured within your agencies, you'll also have some extra added fields here which you are probably required to fill in. Now, these are things such as the source, so where did this particular client or prospect come from, and you should also have your own drop-down tabs. Now, the importance of filling these in is for reporting purposes as well as sales and marketing purposes. So by filling all of these fields in accurately, it means that you can start building lists to export to things like SurveyMonkey, MailChimp. You can also start looking at, you can access management reports within the company for, profitability on particular market sector, things like that. Okay. So once you've filled all of those in, you can also put a web address up there. If you select save, you can now add contacts to that area, which you would do here, where my mouse is. So by selecting new, you can see here, you can add any information. Okay, so you've got the first name, last name, email address, job title. You can also add links to their social media if that's the way that you communicate with them. Okay, just gonna cancel that one. Now, within this client or prospect card, you will have activities. Now, I'm not sure if all of you will be using this functionality, but it is something that is rather useful, so we would recommend it. So if I click onto this activities tab, this is basically an area in which all of the communication between yourselves and your client or between one another about this particular client or prospect is held. So if you selected new, you should have your own list configured within there. So you can select whatever the activity is, whether it's a follow-up call, whether it's an email, whether it's a briefing document. You should be able to log it within this area. So that just means that if anybody comes onto a client or prospect card, they will have full access to see if somebody's already speaking to them, if they've previously requested a quote, all of those sorts of things, okay? Okay, so that's the adding of a new client or prospect. Okay, and I will briefly run over that at the end, everything that we've been through. The next thing I'm going to show you, if I just close this tab down, so remember we entered that through this one here. The next thing I'm going to show you around is creation of an opportunity. Now, an opportunity within Synergist is a job at quote stage. Okay, so you've not yet won the job. It could be 99%, weighted that you will win the job. However, it is just at quote stage. Therefore, we call it an opportunity. So, looking at this tab, let's open that up again. We can see a list of what would be all of your open opportunities. So, all of your open jobs at quote stage. Now you can see you've got an opportunity number, which would be promoted to a job number if the job were to become live. You've got a client name as well. You've also got an account handler. You've also got a description or the name of the job. You've got an expected close date. So that's when we think this job will basically be promoted to a live job or not, when the client will make a decision. You've also got a pipeline stage. So this is looking at exactly where you're at with your opportunities. This means you can put in follow-up calls. It means you can, see new business forecasting type reports and look at potentials coming through and where they are. The next tab is your weighted value. So this is the chance you think you have of winning each of these opportunities. Okay. You can also put a rating on there, and you can see the quote, and you can see a gross margin. So that is basically the quote that is produced, which I'm going to go through in just a second. Okay. So when we want to create a new opportunity, say if one of your clients and prospects have contacted you and said, could we please have a quote for this job? You would come into this area and you would say new. And I'm going to create one from scratch. It may be that on your systems you do actually have templates, okay, of different job structures that you complete within your agency. But just for this purpose, I'm going to create one from scratch, okay? So new opportunity. You now select the client or prospect in which has contacted you. So I'm going to just select IKEA. And okay. Right, this now is an opportunity card for IKEA. So this is basically a job at quote stage for IKEA. Within here, you can put a description. So I'm just literally going to call this test for webinar, okay? The name of the job goes in there. You can also put any comments within this box. And again, dependent on how your jobs are structured, if you have phases and stages, you will need to select that this is a 2-tier phase structure. That will basically allow access to stages as well. For this purpose, I'm just going to keep it really nice and simple, and I'm not going to tick that. Okay, we're going to keep it just at phase level. The next thing you can do is start by filling these fields in. So fill in the job type in which you will have these customizable drop downs, which are probably, again, already set up on your system for you. The next thing you can do is put a sales expected close date. So as mentioned before, this is when you think the job will either become live or not. So when the client will make a decision. Once you've put those details in, if we select OK, and we can then go to details page for opportunity. You can see it's now given this opportunity a number which will relate to a job number if it is promoted. So when we select details page for opportunity, you can see that many more tabs have now appeared along the top. Okay, so we went new opportunity If you've got a template, you can select, the job structure from a template. We usually do recommend that. If you haven't yet got templates within the system, or if it's a kind of bespoke job that isn't like any of your other structures, then you can create it from scratch. And if you want to, once you've created it, by clicking this template button, you can save it into that list of templates to reuse. Okay. So the next thing to do is to fill in a few more of those details by putting things like a pipeline stage in there. So I'll just pop initial communication in there. This will keep you up to date as to when it's last been updated. You can also put a rating, a source, a handler, and a contact from IKEA onto this area. Okay. If I now go on to estimate, I'll show you how we start creating an estimate for your opportunity in order for you to send a quote out to the client or prospect. So let's make this page bigger. There we go. Right, first of all, let's start by adding some phases. So for a job or an opportunity within Synergist, you will need at least one phase. Now that phase could be design, okay? Or it may be that you want it a bit more granular. So you might want a few more phases within the job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 different phases on. The first phase, which is now at green level. So when it turns green, you can see in this bar above, you know it's at phase level. If I just quickly go back up, you can see the blue is at job level, okay? So there's no mistaking whether you're at phase level or job level, because you will have the coloured bar. Okay. Now let's call this phase design, and you can put a phase type if you want to. You can also put a contact, and you can also put a handler and a phase owner. Okay. And then if you look below, you've also got a phase start and a phase due date, which is obviously optional, okay? If we want to add another phase, so we've just added design, let's now say, right, we need another phase, which is going to involve, let's just say, artwork. If we okay that, and then let's add one more phase, which will be production. So do excuse the terminology that I'm using. Obviously, it might be slightly different, okay? You can call those whatever you like. So now we've created the phase structure for our job. So we know that within this job, we've got a design phase, an artwork phase, and a production phase. Okay. Within each of these phases, we now need to work out, so what resource do we need? So the time that we need. So what resource? How long do we need that resource for? Okay. We've also got to take into consideration any internal materials. And we've also got to take into consideration any purchases. We do that in each individual phase. So let's start by looking at this design phase. So if I click into the design phase, you can see it's now turned green because we're at phase level. If I go onto my estimate, you can see here are the tabs in which you can start estimating time, materials, and purchases. So let's start by adding some time. So if we click onto the time tab, so remember we're at phase level in the design phase, okay? Here will be a list of all of the resource within your agency, and all you need to do is add hours like so. If you want, you can double click and add, a lump sum of 50 if that's what's needed. If you need to reduce it, you just press that minus button there. Okay. Let's say for this first one we don't have any materials or purchases. So then what we would need to do is just time that we need for our design phase. We would then select this button here, the right-hand one. This will go to your next phase to enable you to start estimating for the artwork phase. So if I click on that now, we can see we're now in artwork. So here is where it's saying we've got the job name, we've got the client, and we've got the phase. Okay, so again, we can add in the hours that we need for the artwork phase. So I'm just going to add a few random hours in here and there, like so. Finally, if we move to the production phase, so again, clicking this button, we're now on the production phase. I'm going to actually not include any time, okay, but instead I'm going to add a purchase for some, let's say, some print. All you need to do is click onto the Purchases tab, select Edit, add a purchase estimate. This has now providing you with a list of all of your suppliers. Okay, if you want to filter it down, let's go for print. Okay, this is now giving you a list of just your printing suppliers. So when you select one, you can either double click it or you can highlight it and press select. This is where you would put a description. So print for the job. Okay, here you can put a estimated cost. So it might be print for however many copies. The cost you think will be about £1,000. You can then put your markup in there. So let's just put 20%. That's now giving you your charge outright cost. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. You can add lines. You can have a price list, obviously for different quantities and different sizes. But I'm just going to keep it really basic and just add that for now. When I select OK, all right, you can see that estimate for a purchase is now included within our production phase. Let me go back up to job level and we should be able to see what we've now estimated for all three of our phases. So if I go onto our estimate and full estimate, we can see here we've got S, which is for staff. We've got B, which is for brought in costs, and we haven't added any materials. Materials is just this tab here, which are any internal materials. Okay, so that could be if you have internal print on site, something like that you've bought and you sell as a unit. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is creating a quote from our estimate. So we can see we have now, just one thing to mention as well. It's really, really important that we try and make this estimating area as accurate as possible, because this is what's going to run our capacity reports, our new business forecasting reports, potentially our billing forecasting reports as well. So what we need to do in each of those phases is be really accurate as to what resource do we need, how long do we need that resource for. That will then calculate a cost and a charge for those resources, obviously giving you a profit. Okay, now again, do excuse the sort of resource I'm using in the terminology. It might be slightly different. At the bottom there, you'll have a total, so we can see this job, we need 91 hours. It's going to cost us this amount. Therefore, based on the charge rates within the system, we should be charging this amount. Now, again, I can't emphasize anymore how important it is to keep this as accurate as possible. All right, so we're not taking the client's budget into consideration at the moment. When we start taking the client's budget into consideration is when we start creating the quote. Okay, so the estimate, this area is your internal, what do we need, how long do we need it for? Our quote is what should we sell it for? Okay, so what I'm going to do is just create, so what I've done is I've selected build quote and I'm just going to do a summary. That has now brought across all of the phases from the estimate and put the right values against those based on, if I just click back, based on this estimated charge here. Okay, so each of those phases has now got an estimated charge calculated against those. You can see that you've got your gross profit percentage and your net profit percentage. So your gross profit percentage being all costs minus your purchases, and then your net profit being also taken into consideration time, so purchases and time. Okay. If I go back onto my phase quote, this is where we build the quote, and if we need to manipulate what we're actually charging our client, this is where we do it. We don't start adjusting the hours in the estimate because we need those hours to give to the studio team so they've got an accurate, visibility of what they sort of have to complete the work. So this is where you change it. So if I go on to design, you can change it by purely just overwriting it, or if you want to, you can add some discount within here. Okay. Now, once you have done that, what you would do is just purely PDF that, set to today's date, yes, and I'll do one without quantity. Okay. And you now have what would obviously have your own logos on, your quote. Now, if you have email integration, when I actually selected that PDF, the one without quantity, it's actually asking me send PDF as an email attachment. If I selected yes, I could select the person in which I want to send that to, so client contacts, and I could then select who I want to send that to. It would then open up a blank Outlook or Gmail account, so I could put my free text in there and it would be sent as an attachment. Okay, right, what I'm going to do now is we're actually going to add this job to our timesheet. So first of all, we need to promote it to a live job. At the moment, we're just at quote stage. So to promote it to a live job, you can either click on Job Actions, promote this opportunity to a live job, or you can click here and change it from quote to live. If I just select promote, change the headers, yes, we want to change the headers, and select OK. We should now, if I close my list of opportunities and then open my list of jobs, which is this tab here, see that in our list of live jobs. Okay, so just to briefly go over what we're looking at here, this is a list of all live jobs within the system. We're looking at the job number on the left-hand side. We've got the client names, we've got the handler, and again, we've got the name or description. This thermometer bar here is now showing us how far through our budget are we, based on the time that has been recorded. Now, we haven't got, sorry about that, we haven't got any time recorded against our job at the moment, which is why it's not showing up as anything. So what I'm going to do now is just really quickly record some time against it so I can show you where the time recorded goes on the job. Okay, so I've just noted that job number down. So if I were to now open up my web time and expenses, so you should all have this, whether you use an app for this or whether you use you might have something on your desktop which opens this automatically, depending on how your project manager set this up for you. It should look like this. Okay, now to record time against the job that we've just created, if you go into this area here, now there is a daily timesheet as well. I'm going to show you the weekly timesheet today purely because it does seem to be the most popular that we see within the agencies, and it is quite a nice, easy view of it. So if I click onto weekly timesheet, we've now got a list of all jobs that each individual are working on. So you would log into your own area here. So you would just be looking at the jobs in which you are working on. What you can do is you can add job. Now you can select it by the client name and the job name and the phase if you want to. What I'm going to do is just select the job number in here because I've noted that down. So I'm just going to, there we go. And there it is. If I now select design, so let's say that I want to record some time to our job for IKEA. The name was test for webinar and the phase name was design. So let's select that. You can see here it has now appeared in my list. All right. And you should also have a charge code in which you record the time against. So I'm just going to pop sign in 10 in there. Right. What you can do now is just select a number of hours. So I'm going to say I worked on this job, the design phase, for 3 hours, and I'm going to write just some notes, just pop some X's in there. If I close that, we can see that's blue, so you know that you've recorded some notes. I'm going to post that. Okay, so we've now just posted 3 hours. You can see here. If I go back to my job, we can see we're now 3% of the way through our budget. Okay, so by clicking back into this job card, so this was the opportunity card which we created. It's now been promoted to a job card, so it holds all of the same information. If I go onto our estimate, you can see here are the 3 hours in which I've recorded. Okay. And if I want to look at notes, I can double click onto sheets, and there are those X's. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I hope all of that makes sense. Just quickly, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, I'm just going to really briefly go over everything that we've been through today. So first of all, we looked at a list of all clients and prospects, which is located in this tab here. So if I click onto the My Clients tab, this is where all clients and prospects are held. If I click onto one of these, any of them, so let's go onto this one here, you will have a prospect card or a client card. This is where all of their contact information is held. Earlier, I showed you how to create a new one, and that was just by selecting new, so new client or prospect, and it will give you a blank card to start filling in their information, which we also looked through. Okay. The next thing we looked at was the opportunities tab here. So from creating either, let's say, creating a prospect, okay, they may then ask for a quote, in which case we would create an opportunity for that prospect. So basically create a job at quote stage, come into the opportunities. You can either select new and use a template, okay. So you could have brochure, you could have web design, you could have, social media campaign. Different types of jobs that you do obviously will be structured slightly differently, so you can use a template if you've got them set up. If you haven't yet got them set up, but you want to set some up, you would just select new opportunity and add the phases as we looked at before, which is by, let's go on to one that I've got here. So if I select the phases tab, you can see this is where you start creating those phases by saying edit, add new phase. If we select, let's go into one of those phases, we can start by clicking on the estimate tab. We can start estimating time, materials and purchases to that job, to that phase, which will give you an overall, if we go on to the job level estimate, an overall estimate for the whole job. And you can see it is separated by those different phases. Okay, so we have run out of time today. I hope all of that made sense, and I hope I didn't go through it too quickly. If you have any questions about anything that I've been through today, I'll just write my email address in the comments box now, so you should all have access to that. So if you do have any questions, there we go. Don't hesitate to drop me an email across, and I'd be happy to answer them. Hope that you all found that useful, and speak to you soon.